Since 2022, China's cross-border e-commerce industry has grown rapidly worldwide, supported by the Chinese Communist Party's tax incentives and subsidies. However, as Chinese e-commerce companies capture overseas markets with low prices, many countries are becoming wary and looking for ways to counteract this trend. Experts warn that China's cross-border e-commerce industry is under scrutiny and may face tougher times ahead. Cross-border e-commerce is a significant part of China's foreign trade. Currently, there are over 100,000 Chinese cross-border e-commerce companies with major platforms including Temu under Pinduoduo, AliExpress under Alibaba, and Shein. Data shows that in 2023, the total market size of China's cross-border import e-commerce was 551 billion yuan, a 4.6% year-on-year increase. The top three import retail e-commerce platforms were Tmall Global, 37.6%, JD Worldwide, 18.7%, and Douyin Global Shopping, 12.3%. According to a report from China's Xinhua news agency at the end of November 2023, the share of cross-border e-commerce in China's foreign trade has risen from less than 1% to around 5% over the past 5 years. In 2023, the scale of cross-border e-commerce imports and exports reached 2.4 trillion yuan, growing by 15.6%. The global shift in consumer habits due to the 3-year pandemic has led to increased demand for online shopping, causing a boom in B2C cross-border e-commerce. Platforms like AliExpress, Shein, and Temu have expanded significantly. In 2022, many Chinese cross-border e-commerce companies have collectively ventured abroad, with small and medium-sized enterprises leveraging these platforms to expand internationally. Chinese cross-border e-commerce has made a formidable entrance. Currently, on TikTok, the Shein hashtag has amassed 80.1 billion views. Temu has become the 4th most visited retail website in the United States, trailing only Amazon, Walmart, and eBay. Although these new Chinese e-commerce giants have yet to dethrone Amazon's dominance in the U.S. e-commerce sector, the global economic downturn and signs of consumer spending reduction during Black Friday suggest that Amazon might eventually face serious competition from these low-priced Chinese e-commerce players. Temu, a subsidiary of Pinduoduo, replicates its domestic model by exporting the high cost-effectiveness of Chinese supply chains overseas, offering products like a $2.99 air fryer and a 10-pair pack of socks for $1.87. Data indicates that prices for shoes, clothing, and household goods on Temu are 30 to 50% lower than those of its competitors. Since its launch in the U.S. market in September 2022, the Temu app became the most downloaded iPhone app in the United States in 2023. Since its entry into the European market in April 2023, according to the latest research by ECC Köln, 32% of German consumers have made purchases on Temu, up from 11% the previous year. Ms. Xu from Quebec, Canada, who works in the foreign trade industry, noted that Temu differs from Shein. Shein primarily imitates European and American brand clothing produced by Chinese factories, which often leads to a bad reputation and frequent lawsuits, making a U.S. stock market listing unlikely. In contrast, Temu allows anyone to list their products for sale, similar to Amazon. While these Chinese cross-border e-commerce platforms attract users with incredibly low prices and a wide variety of products, they face significant criticism in other areas. Germany's business newspaper Handelsblatt pointed out that despite Temu's free return policy, customers often have to argue with sellers or are denied refunds. Temu is also very proactive in deleting negative 1-star reviews. Platforms like Amazon and German's Auto have garnered more consumer trust. An economist based in the United States, Li Hengqing, pointed out that the rapid expansion of these cross-border e-commerce platforms is primarily due to their low prices. The costs of raw materials, processing, and shipping are very low, and government subsidies for cross-border e-commerce take full advantage of all possible benefits. Additionally, importing countries were initially unprepared for this influx. Another significant factor is the overall downturn of the Chinese economy, leading many struggling enterprises to transition into cross-border e-commerce. Professor Xie Tian from the University of South Carolina Aiken School of Business commented that the rapid overseas development of platforms like Pinduoduo's Temu and Shein is due to their extensive advertising campaigns on social media platforms such as X, Facebook, and Instagram. For instance, a product that might sell for $20 or $30 in the US market might be sold for just $1 on these platforms, often with free shipping. Given the severe inflation in Europe and America, consumers are eager to save money, making such deals hard to resist. Although these steep discounts are typically only for first-time purchases, prices remain very low even after the initial discount. Xie also noted a significant drawback of Chinese small commodities, their lack of reliability. These cheap products often lack quality, breaking after just a few uses, leading to a feeling of having purchased a pile of junk. Another major weakness is long delivery times. While Americans can receive their Amazon orders in a day or two, orders from Temu might take 2 or 3 weeks or even longer. In reality, these small items are readily available at American department stores, where shoppers can buy a large bag of such goods for a modest price, making shipping multiple small packages overseas a waste of resources. Internet marketing expert Jiang Yuefei observed that the turning point for live e-commerce has arrived.
During this year's Black Friday in the US, sales increased by only 6% compared to last year, and no Chinese cross-border e-commerce products were sold out, indicating a shift. The success of Chinese online and live e-commerce lies in their low prices, achieved through white label, counterfeit, and substitute products. However, this strategy doesn't work in the US, where branding is crucial and brands are reluctant to slash prices. This has resulted in a healthier market where rational consumers prioritize brands and reasonable quality and prices, contrasting with China's low-price-focused strategy, which may not be sustainable in the long run. The relentless pursuit of low prices in China may ultimately result in no profits for anyone except the platforms and top influencers.
The rapid growth of China's cross-border e-commerce industry is largely attributed to policy support aimed at boosting export trade. The Chinese authorities have consistently provided tax incentives and subsidies, easing administrative requirements to support the development of cross-border e-commerce. Since 2014, cross-border e-commerce has been included in the government work report for 11 consecutive years, recognized as a new driver for foreign trade growth. Since 2015, Chinese authorities have established 165 comprehensive cross-border e-commerce pilot zones, where e-commerce retail export goods are exempted from value-added tax and consumption tax, and income tax is offered at preferential rates. During the US-China trade war in 2018, the Chinese authorities countered the Trump administration's tariffs on Chinese goods by reducing export taxes for domestic exporters. Additionally, local governments in areas like Hangzhou and Shenzhen, where cross-border e-commerce is concentrated, have introduced incentive measures. In February of last year, Hangzhou provided up to 2 million yuan in support to companies engaged in cross-border e-commerce exports. Companies that promote their own brands through social media, search engines, and cross-border live streaming received up to 25% of their promotion costs in financial support. Companies are also encouraged to go abroad to seize orders, with subsidies covering up to 70% of the booth fees for participating in cross-border e-commerce exhibitions. In 2023, Shenzhen offered 450,000 yuan in non-repayable subsidies for cross-border e-commerce startups. Some local governments aim to boost their local economies or industries. For example, Jiangxi has tea and Henan has sweet potato starch. If these local governments want to export these products, businesses involved in exports may receive incentives such as financial support for preferential loans or building overseas warehouses. Tax exemptions, tax reductions, reduced export taxes, and export tax rebates are all forms of government subsidies. The Chinese government actively supports these e-commerce platforms in their overseas expansion by offering tax exemptions and other benefits, effectively bypassing tariffs to directly enter the European and American markets, thereby increasing exports. Moreover, the rise of e-commerce platforms like Temu relies heavily on large-scale data collection, including data on consumer preferences, such as search and click counts, while it claims to ensure the security of personal data and emphasizes that European customers' data is stored in Europe. The security analyst company Joe Sandbox has rated Temu as a malicious application. On May 16th, a European consumer group accused Temu of using manipulative tactics, violating EU online platform regulations by failing to provide consumers with key information about sellers, leading consumers to spend more than they intended. The United States is the largest buyer of Chinese e-commerce goods. Mike Gallagher, chairman of the U.S. House Select Committee on the Strategic Competition between the United States and the Chinese Communist Party, disclosed earlier this month that in the 2024 fiscal year, which began in October, 485 million e-commerce items have already entered the United States in less than 6 months. He criticized that millions of packages enter the U.S. daily with minimal inspections and information, overwhelming U.S. border control's capabilities. According to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, over 1 billion duty-free e-commerce packages were delivered to the U.S. in the 2023 fiscal year, setting a record. Temu and fast fashion giant Shein accounted for 30% of these packages. These cross-border e-commerce platforms have been quietly collecting user data, U.S. consumer personal information from names and addresses to purchase amounts, purchase intentions, and credit card details can be linked to individuals with a name, address, and postal code, allowing direct contact and even estimation of household income. The collection of big data on fast fashion platforms includes information on politicians and public officials' personal preferences. As long as this information is public, there's no issues. However, users' banking information, including personal details like home addresses, is protected in the U.S. The Chinese government often accesses such information without constraints. Both domestically and internationally, vast amounts of data are often stolen, misappropriated, or sold without any regards for limits, regulations, or legal awareness, posing serious threats to the safety of residents in Europe and the United States. Temu faces significant challenges regarding compliance, including issues such as tariff evasion, dumping, environmental sustainability, intellectual property, and labor exploitation, which have led to pushback from countries in Europe and the United States. A U.S. congressional report last summer pointed out that the low prices of Chinese fast fashion e-commerce are due to forced labor and exploitation of U.S. postal system loopholes. Swiss NGO Public Eye reported in May that despite Shein's promises to improve working conditions, some of its suppliers still have workers working over 75 hours a week. Starting in 2021, the EU began imposing VAT on small imported goods, and in 2023, the European Commission announced the EU's customs reform proposal, planning to eliminate the current duty-free policy for imports below €150. France introduced the Law 2129 last year to combat low-cost fast fashion by imposing an ecological footprint surcharge on such products. In April, South Korean regulators launched an investigation into Temu, suspecting false advertising and unfair practices. It's not just awareness anymore. Chinese cross-border e-commerce has been targeted, and the next step is to see the degree of these policies' impact. Platforms like Temu exploit certain loopholes in the Universal Postal Union. Currently, small packages sent from China to the U.S. might have lower shipping costs than domestic U.S. postage. If real prices were charged for shipping, Chinese e-commerce might struggle to survive. However, eliminating these postal benefits poses technical challenges, given the high volume of small packages, taxing each item, which may cost only a few dollars, could overwhelm customs processes, making implementation difficult. Governments have a crucial role in protecting their citizens' interests. If cheap products are massively dumped, leading to the hollowing out of domestic industries and increased reliance on imports, widespread unemployment may be the result. When China first joined the World Trade Organization, it made hundreds of commitments, including lowering tariffs and opening up competition. The Chinese government demanded protections for its automotive and appliance industries, as they couldn't compete otherwise. High tariffs and subsidies for exporters were part of these protections. Initially, Western countries agreed to these terms, but over 2 decades later, China has far exceeded the situation of protecting its own industries, effectively outcompeting many Western industries. The Chinese government understands this and now boasts that its companies have honed their skills in free market competition and have won the market. Aggressive competition from China has squeezed out domestic industries. The international community now recognizes this, and platforms like Pinduoduo's Temu and Shein will likely face many restrictions in Europe and the United States in the future. With additional fees, their products will no longer be as affordable. Additionally, some products sold by Chinese cross-border e-commerce platforms may involve forced labor, On April 23rd, members of the European Parliament voted to pass a new law banning products made with forced labor. While the law does not specifically mention China, many legislators hope that it will be used to block imports from China involving products linked to forced labor in regions inhabited by Uyghurs and other Muslim minority groups. According to human rights organizations, at least 1 million people, mostly from Muslim minority groups, are detained in China's northwest Xinjiang region, facing widespread abuses, including forced sterilizations and forced labor. The U.S. Department of State's 2023 Country Reports on Human Rights Practices noted that during this year, China committed genocide and crimes against humanity against predominantly Muslim Uyghurs and other ethnic and religious minority groups in Xinjiang. The draft text of the law was voted on in Strasbourg, France, and after being approved by the European Parliament, it will become law upon final approval by the 27 EU member states. The Chinese Communist Party, CCP, uses economic activities such as dumping low-cost products and low-quality goods to dominate international markets, thereby expanding its global influence and promoting its communist ideology and the so-called Community of Shared Future for Mankind, ultimately aiming to strengthen the CCP's regime and achieve global dominance. Currently, China's economy faces severe internal competition, leading to large inventories of products flooding overseas markets. Particularly, through online cross-border trading platforms, these products are broken down into small parcels and exported using low-cost, tax-free loopholes, resulting in these small packages from Chinese e-commerce being universally condemned and targeted for restriction in various countries.